I look forward to hearing more about your day-to-day work, the tools and strategies you use, and any advice that you might have for someone entering the field of instructional design. Apologies. I am taking a course about instructional design at Florida Gulf Coast University. One of our projects is to interview professionals in the field to gain a deeper understanding of the work. This interview will be recorded and transcribed. If you would like your identity to remain confidential, I will remove any identifying information before submitting my project. The recording will be deleted within 2 months. May I begin recording?
Absolutely.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, Dr. Megan Murtaugh, thank you again for taking the time to talk about your instructional design experience. I have had the opportunity to look at your online portfolio, and I was not disappointed. You have experienced many different hats from what I've seen. You've worked in elementary education, as a government contractor, and in higher education. That being said, I'd love to hear more about your background. Can you describe your educational background and experience in instructional design?
Sure, absolutely. So my background started in, I have a bachelor's degree in developmental psychology. So I started off with learning about learning from the start. That was basically where I began. And once I finished my psychology degree, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with it, but one of the things that I do remember from that time was I did do kind of like a service class, and we did tutoring for unwed mothers at the YWCA in Massachusetts in Worcester, and I really enjoyed doing that tutoring. So I was like, well, maybe I'll be a teacher. So I decided to go back to school and get my teaching degree. So I went back and did a master's degree in teaching with a concentration in elementary education. And through that experience, I worked as an intern for a full year out of school. And then the following year, I worked as an assistant teacher in a special education classroom. So I think those really provided me a solid foundation on different types of learning and how you need different strategies to reach different learners. So that definitely played a strong role in my instructional design career, is having those experiences. And then I taught for about 8 full-time years in a K-12 setting, and during that time I also served on the curriculum committee, so I did curriculum redesign for whichever grade level I happened to be teaching that year. I've done that for 3rd grade, 4th grade, and 5th grade as well. So as part of the district, they would do like summer camps, so to speak, where they would have a bunch of teachers get together and you would go through the curriculum and redesign the curriculum for the upcoming year, making sure that you're addressing the standards that were in place. And when I was teaching, we went through a couple of different iterations of standards. We had the Sunshine State standards, and then later on, they adopted a version of the Common Core standards as well. So always designing education based on standards or some type of goal or outcome. And so when I was teaching, I didn't realize what I was doing when I was creating the learning materials or learning content for my classes. I didn't realize that was instructional design until I went back to school and did my doctorate in instructional technology and distance education. And I also minored in curriculum development. And so one of the first couple of classes that I took was instructional design. And the first reading that I did, I was like, wait a second. I was like, this is very familiar. I know this already. And so, lesson planning for K-12 is very similar to doing instructional design in other areas. So I didn't realize what I had been doing all along was instructional design. And I really liked the fact that I could do it in other settings. And so after completing my doctorate, I started looking into other areas that I could do instructional design, and I started off by doing an internship for a university in the UK, Bath University. They had an internship program, so I did a 12-week internship program with them and worked with a professor who wanted to integrate more blended opportunities, learning opportunities in their classes. They were primarily a face-to-face ground institution, and their provost was looking to incorporate more blended opportunities and also online opportunities for students. And so I was able to do that for one of the courses. And then after that, I did some contract work for other universities, and also had full-time positions with universities doing instructional design. So creating ground courses and also online courses. And I've done anything anywhere between 8-week classes to full 16-week classes, and working with a whole group on that design process. So working with other instructional designers, program chairs, multimedia specialists, so people who were experts at doing video or audio or web design, that kind of thing. And so when I worked at Post University, we had a really great group of multimedia specialists, and I could come up with an idea for a class, and then they could make it come to life, basically. So I could be as creative as I wanted to be, and then kind of like throw it out there to them and be like, all right, what can you make based on this wacky idea that I have? So it's been quite fun to be able to do those types of things. And then I transitioned into working as a government contractor, working for a couple of different companies, doing different types of work, and that's been rewarding as well. So quite a lot of experiences. And one of the best things about instructional design is that it's applicable to any field. So I love learning, and so in my job, I get to learn something new every day. So I think that's like the coolest part about being an instructional designer.
Yes, absolutely. I actually took one thing from you at the very beginning of the 6606 course, and you said knowledge is a gift that you can give yourself that no one can ever take away from you. And I just absolutely love that. I wrote it down on my syllabus, and because I wholeheartedly believe in the same thing. Absolutely. And
it's funny, that saying has been with me for years. I said that to my first 4th grade classroom that I taught, because a lot of the kids that I taught were from low-income families, and so that's what I told them. I'm like, listen, knowledge is a gift you give yourself. No one can take it away from you. So the more you can do in school and the more you can learn in school, the better off you're going to be down the road, because you're going to have that knowledge to be able to do whatever you want.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's amazing. I'm actually going to say something similar to my students this upcoming year too, and I know it'll motivate them. So I really appreciate that. I admire the words you say and the work that you've done across all of the different settings. As someone just starting out in the field, it's inspiring to see that you've applied instructional design in so many different environments, and I'm so excited to learn from those experiences. So how would you define instructional design?
So I would just define instructional design as a process, so you have to go through this process of creating learning environments, and you're using learning theory, instructional design models, and all these different ingredients, so to speak, to come up with just the right mix for just the right audience. And so instructional design is really a process of finding the right fit for who you're trying to teach and the goal that you have for that learning. If that makes sense.
Yes, it absolutely does make sense. it's sort of similar to Dr. Luke Hobson. He stated that instructional design is understanding how people learn online. And so from what you said, it's very similar.
It is, and it's not just online though. Instructional design is for anything. So some of the contract work that I do right now is for on-site learning, like people that have to use, different machines in the field. So you're teaching them step-by-step technical processes, so to speak, instead of just content-based learning. So instructional design covers everything, all different media as well, in person, online, a combination of both, using technology, not using technology.
Yes, absolutely. And I suppose that, all of that depends on obviously the setting, the audience, and all of that fun stuff, and that ties into models or frameworks. So what sort of models or frameworks do you find the most effective, and how do you adapt them?
So the one model that I've used the most has been backward design, and that has been in almost every setting that I've worked in. And that's where you start with the end goal in mind of what do you want your learners to be able to do at the end? What is the purpose? What do you want them to do? And then coming up with some type of way to assess that learning outcome. And then finding the resources that support that outcome and them being able to complete that assessment to show the learning. So for example, when I was working in higher ed, there were a couple of different marketing courses that I worked on, and I don't know anything about marketing. So I would meet with the subject matter experts and say, so in the real world, if you're in marketing and you're in the marketing field, and this course, the content in this course, what is something in the real world that a learner or user would have to do at their job? What is something that they would have to do? And so I would have my SMEs tell me about products that they would need to create out in the real world, and then I would try to incorporate those into the classes so that students were creating real examples that they could bring and show employers. Yeah, I might not have experience, but in this course we were given a scenario, and I used this scenario to create this portfolio item. So this is an example of the work that I'm capable of, even though I technically don't have, experience.
Yeah, yes, absolutely.
In entry level. So that was what I tried to do in a lot of the courses that I was helping design, was to find a real world application, so that we weren't just doing multiple choice tests.
Right.
Because in the real world, you don't do multiple choice tests at your job.
Right.
You're creating something. You're having to do something or perform something, and so that was that's what I try to incorporate into my design.
That's awesome. I absolutely love the backwards design model. I've used it in a few of my assignments in the past as well. So as I've said previously, I've had the opportunity to look in your online portfolio, and I saw that you used the Dick and Carey instructional model to create the print-based instruction on creating a pillowcase dress for your children, which was beautifully done, I might add, especially with that time constraint of 30 minutes. But, from my understanding of the Dick and Carey model, it's largely used for online instruction. In hindsight, would you consider integrating other models in that instruction?
So I think one thing to keep in mind is with a lot of these instructional design models is they're not specific to a setting. So they're not specific to in-person or online. And Dick and Carey, their model has been around way before online learning ever happened.
Right.
So their model is more actually sometimes attached with military training. And so using that hierarchical analysis diagram, you're actually putting out all of the different steps that are needed in order to accomplish a specific task. And so, like I did with the pillowcase dress, you had to figure out what the baseline skills had to be beforehand, and then write out all the tasks associated with creating that pillowcase dress. And it's the same thing that they would do in the military if they wanted them to be able to do a certain mortarman task or a certain field task, something specific. They would have to list out all of the steps in order for that individual to accomplish. And then a lot of times they would use like a checklist as they were evaluating the person on whether or not they were completing the task appropriately.
Right, that was something I noticed you did as well. A lot of work was put into that assignment, and I saw it, so perfectly said. Now, how would you communicate complex design concepts to non-experts?
So in the past, it depends. I've used analogies. So for like trying to explain what instructional design is, we try to talk about how like instructional designers take the materials and create like the house. So like you have the foundation, and you have the walls, and you have the roof. But if you're missing a part, then that house isn't going to stand. And the same thing with instructional design. If everything isn't in place, you're not going to have learning. Learning isn't going to occur. So using analogies to try to explain a complex concept, or like that hierarchical diagram analysis. I've done other diagrams, not as complex as that one, more simplistic. Mm-hmm. Using Visio, I actually did that for one of the government contract jobs that I had, was to kind of show how all of the different electrical power systems fit together in the curriculum that we were looking to create. So that's another way that I've done things too, is just providing a visual, or providing some type of analogy or anecdotal story.
Yes, I myself love visuals. I'm sure everybody else does too. Analogies are great. Awesome. So, what common challenges do you face, and how do you overcome them?
So, many times when you're doing instructional design, you're assigned a project, and there can be set parameters already in place that you don't have control over. So a lot of times it's letting go and accepting the project at face value for what you're able to accomplish, and just doing your best to meet the goals of that project. In a perfect world, you get to start at the beginning for a project, and you get to do the analysis component and determine whether or not there actually is a need for the training or the education piece that someone has already told you needs to be done. So that can be the very challenging, is getting assigned to a project that doesn't even really need to be created because it's not going to address a problem.
Right.
So that's one of the most common challenges. Another challenge is communication. That's one of the biggest challenges I think there is in instructional design, is communicating with the team that you're working with, subject matter experts, and that can be, a very challenging thing, especially if you're on a tight deadline. So some of the workarounds that I've used or implemented is, when I was working in higher ed, we had a specific time frame that we had to get classes done in. And so, I would keep emails that I had sent out previously so that I wouldn't have to retype the same email over and over again. And so I kind of had like email templates for certain stages of a project. Mm-hmm. So that's one way to help with efficiency and communication challenges, is have certain things set up ahead of time. Take notes on like what's been successful and what hasn't been successful, and then work more towards the side that has worked better for you. One of the things that I do recommend when working with subject matter experts is developing a rapport with them, spending some time getting to know your subject matter expert so that you understand like what their time commitment is, like what availability they have, what their workflow looks like. You know, is it easier for you to send them a checklist of things to do to get back to you, or do they work better if you schedule a 30-minute block 2 or 3 times a week with them and get that information from them live in a meeting? Those types of things. So exploring that type of relationship with your SMEs and getting to know them and what works best for them sets you up for success going forward.
Well, awesome. That's some great advice that you've got there. But speaking of some challenges, have you experienced any oversaturation in the field?
What do you mean specifically by oversaturation?
Too many instructional designers, so it's hard to get a job, or competition is way up there.
Well, I mean, if you do a search for instructional design positions, you'll see there's hundreds of them out there. So there are plenty of positions out there. Sometimes it is a connection of who you know on getting an interview. Mm-hmm. It's also how you tailor your resume, how you tailor your cover letter, and making sure that you're using the keywords that are in the job description that the company is looking for. AI is used a lot now for screening, for resumes and for cover letters. So if you don't have those buzzwords in there, you're just getting tossed.
Oh, it's good to know.
I mean, I can remember applying for jobs and like getting a rejection letter within an hour. I'm sorry. Wow. The human did not review my stuff
right.
in an hour.
Absolutely not.
So yeah, it's all I can say is just keep applying.
Okay. Thank you.
It's but it does help. It does help if you know somebody at the company who can put a referral through for you, so then your application gets looked at a little bit differently. So I've had that happen a couple of times in a couple of different roles where someone I knew somebody that was hiring and was like, hey, I know this person, they're really good at instructional design, you should consider them. And then my resume kind of got sent in that way. Mm-hmm. So it definitely is very beneficial to network,
right,
and to make connections and to be active in the field. I have to say I'm not as active as I once was, but I definitely at one point was very active in AECT and held different positions in that organization and have a lot of connections through there. Still have a lot of connections today, like not even just in Florida. That's actually how I met Dr. Stork, was through AECT. And Dr. Wang as well. And Dr. Turcotte too. Turcotte. He was one of the interns when I was the intern coordinator for AECT.
Wow. Well, that's awesome. And you bring up AECT, and I recall, you winning the Design and Development Award, right? As a grad student.
A grad student.
Yes,
mm-hmm.
That's so awesome. I'm actually wanting to do the same thing. Do you have any advice or anything to be successful with that?
I would say you're in a unique position because you guys, your other teammate, like your classmates, you guys can see each other and meet together face to face if you wanted to. Mm-hmm. When I competed in that competition, my partner who was in the competition with me lived in North Carolina.
Oh.
And so we did our project completely virtually. And I think we were the first team that worked in a virtual setting in order to complete our project. We still had to present in person at the conference, but leading up to that, we did everything remotely. We were never together to work on the project. I think since then, a lot of teams have been, you know, remote from each other, have not been, you know, in the same area in order to get together to work. But I think that was a unique experience for us, and to share that experience with people who participated. So what I would say is, taking that into consideration, is that you could partner with anybody. It doesn't have to be somebody that's at FGCU. You could meet somebody through the organization or another organization that is interested in doing the competition, and you could, as long as you guys are both members of AECT, you can enter the competition.
Wow, that's just awesome. I appreciate that. Thank you. So what key skills are needed for the future of instructional design?
I would say definitely embracing AI and integrating it into your design and delivery of instruction and in training and education. AI is not going away, and the more people try to say, oh, I don't need to deal with it, the more you're going to regret it. You definitely need to embrace it and learn how to harness its power and use it for the good in your design and development. Unfortunately, I could see AI taking over in education and training.
Yeah.
If it gets to the point where it's, advanced enough. I still think, though, that there needs to be a human entity, because I still think that there needs to be some type of expert involved in reviewing what is generated by AI. I had a class last semester that I taught, and I integrated AI as one of their assignments and had them use AI to generate a lesson plan or instructional design plan, and then had them evaluate it afterwards and critique whether or not they, would have used it as is, or if they would modify it or not. And I think that's something to keep in mind anytime you use AI, is that you need to double check it, because it's not perfect.
Right.
I think actually it might be, but right now it's not.
Right.
So you need to be the expert and go through and review the information that is generated and make sure that you're not using it as is.
Right, yeah, and honestly, at the beginning of my IDIT journey, I was very nervous to use AI, due to controversial conversations and everything like that. But as I've continued, my education, I do feel more confident in using the tool, using it as a tool, and benefiting from it. Absolutely.
Yes, exactly. It's another tool in your toolbox.
Exactly. Yes, ma'am. So my next question here is, how has the field changed post-COVID-19?
Let's see. It's hard for me to embrace that question, because I was already working remote before COVID. I started working remote in 2014. So for me, life just continued on as normal. But I would say that post-COVID-19, that there's a wider acceptance of remote work, and also a much broader appreciation for the portability of education. And so I think educators and trainers now have to think in mindset of, what if we were to go into lockdown again? Can this content be used online, or would it need a lot of TLC in order to make it usable? And I think that has influenced instructional design to the point where a lot of things are being developed now with that mindset of, if we were just to be able to put everything completely online, that's the mindset to use as you design certain projects and stuff.
Yes, absolutely. That's something that I've noticed in my experience as well. It also kind of adds into addressing, the diversity, the equity, and even inclusion. Now, how would you address that diversity, equity, and inclusion in your work?
In my work, so there's a lot of different things that are in place in the different areas that I've worked. So in higher ed, they have ADA compliance that you have to do. There's certain checklists that usually each university has because it is a requirement that classes are accessible and students don't have to identify themselves in higher ed. It helps if they do, especially if they identify what their learning needs are. But for the most part, in most of the colleges that I've worked for, all the videos have transcripts or closed captioning or both, one or the other or both. Mm-hmm. Certain color, making sure things are color, contrast appropriate, that there's a certain contrast level hit. In government contracting, I forget the number, the ratio, there's a specific ratio for the color contrast, wording things a certain way, like hyperlinks, you don't just list out the hyperlink, like you hyperlink a word that is related to, if it's let's say it's like a PDF of a chapter or something like that, or a website, that you're hyperlinking the name of the website or the name of the chapter, and you're not just putting the whole strand of the URL as the hyperlink, because screen readers will read every single character instead of a word, instead of it as a word. And not using click here or click this, because it doesn't really provide direction or description to a screen reader of what it is that's being clicked. So just certain things like that that we have in place depending on the environment that you work in. I definitely use more of a UDL approach to design for online learning, and it's been a while since I've done in-person learning, so but I've always, even when I was teaching in elementary, I had a student who was hearing impaired, visually impaired, and motor impaired, and I was constantly modifying stuff for that student so that they could access the curriculum better.
That's awesome. I mean, being a middle school teacher myself, I've definitely seen the hands-on benefits of addressing diversity, equity, and inclusion. Absolutely. There's just a couple more questions I have for you. I don't want to take up too much time. So what is one particularly memorable experience that you've had as an instructional designer, whether it was a positive success or a challenging situation?
So one example that I can remember, I would say, was when I was on one of the government contracts. I was a contractor for the Federal Aviation Administration, and one of the projects that I was working on had to do with electrical engineering, and their different power distribution systems that they worked on. And so I got to go visit on site different facilities that had their different power systems. And after that visit, we took the 3D videos and imaging that we took while we were on site there, and we used those to create a simulation for an on-site visit walkthrough. And so I thought that was pretty neat. Like, that was a pretty cool experience for me to be there in person, see it all being captured, and then take that data that we captured and then turning it into a learning experience.
That definitely sounds like a memorable experience. Wow. My last question for you is, what do you think is the most important skill or mindset for someone to succeed in instructional design today?
So, flexibility. That's one thing you have got to be in doing instructional design. Being flexible and being a problem solver. Definitely, problem solving is definitely high up there. Project management is another skill. But mindset, I would say mostly it's just flexibility, and the willingness to learn something,
Right.
learn something new.
Right, absolutely.
Definitely is important to keep that open mind and be open to other opportunities that might be out there that you wouldn't necessarily consider, or other options when you're designing,
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes somebody can come up with an idea, it's not yours, but it's something that can add value to what you're working on.
Absolutely. Wow, you've had some really insightful things to say tonight. I really do appreciate you and your time. I do have a quick follow-up question in terms of your online portfolio, your photography. Would you be okay with me? It's amazing. I absolutely love it, and the animals are so cute. Would you be okay with me sharing a couple of those pictures in my Canva slideshow for my assignment?
Oh yeah, that's fine.
Perfect. I'll make sure I credit you and all of that.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. So thanks again, Dr. Murtaugh. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me. It was incredibly helpful to hear about your journey and how you approach both the creative and collaborative sides of instructional design. I'd love to stay in touch and follow your work. Do you have any concluding comments?
I would just say thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this interview, and definitely reach out on LinkedIn to stay connected after class.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you again for your time. You have a wonderful evening.
You too. Thank you so much.
Thank you.